So this is what bees look like when they're clustering. When it's cold and they're not moving, they're just sort of hanging out in a state of torpor. And that's exactly what I want them to do. Oh. I don't want those bees moving. I just want them to sort of hang out. And when it gets warm, they can move around and eat their honey and have a good time. But right now, they're just sort of clustering, cold, staying warm, looking good. What was I going to say about these hives? What am I doing this year? Yes, okay, back to the old black paint again. All my hives are painted black, just like the red door the Rolling Stones wanted to paint. And I'm doing this instead of wrapping them. If these bees were in a location that wasn't surrounded by trees, where they're protected by the wind, if they were getting blasted by winter wind all winter long, I would probably wrap them with something, probably just basic roofing felt to act as a windbreak, but they don't need that because they're sheltered. So they're painted black anyway, because that little bit of black will help them absorb a little bit of heat when the sun is shining. And I wish I could move this hive to that location, because that location gets more sun in the winter, and I'd rather they get a little bit more sun, but I can't. I beekeep by myself and I don't have anyone to help me lift it, so it's gonna have to just stay here, and hopefully it'll do okay, and I think it will. So that's the deal behind the black paint. That's one thing I'm doing. I have hives in another location that are out in the open, and they probably will get wrapped, but these guys I think are going to be fine just being painted black. The other thing I'm doing is, I think this is basically the first winter where I'm going all mediums with all my hives. So there's no deeps, no deep brood chambers, nothing like that. This is the one hive. I have another hive in another location, but in this location, this is the one hive that has a deep box, and you can't really see it well here because it's getting dark, and this is all painted black. But from here to there is a deep, and it's a big long frame. And from here to here is the medium. And these are my medium boxes that I have in all of my hives. And the idea behind that is, one, I don't like lifting deep frames anymore, or deep boxes full of honey. It's really heavy, and so I don't want to do it. So I'm using smaller boxes. And the other reason for going mediums is you can see here it's just a smaller frame. And in the wintertime, when the bees are say in the deep, and they need to move from one frame of honey to another frame of honey, and it's cold, in order for them to go from one frame to the other, they need to walk the full length of that hive, get to the top or the bottom, and then crawl around and then get to the other hive, to the other frame. And sometimes it's so cold that they can't break cluster enough to do that. They get up and they break cluster, and it's cold, and they can't stop moving. Just like those bees I just showed you earlier, they don't move, and they just can't make it to the other side of the frame, and they basically starve to death within inches of a block of honey, because they just can't traverse the full length of the deep frame. But if you use a medium frame or a medium box, the bees are clustered pretty much covering the frame already in the cluster. So when they go over one frame to the next, they just go bloop, bloop. They're already practically there, right? So there's less space where they need to be exposed to the cold to get to the next frame. So they're able to theoretically move from one frame to the other much easier on medium frames and on deep frames. So that's one reason I'm doing it. You could possibly alleviate that problem if you drilled holes in your deep frames, like say 1/4 inch, 3/4 inch holes or whatever, so that the bees could just sort of travel through those holes to get through the frames in the wintertime. And I've done that, and it works. But I like the mediums, so that's why I'm going with mediums, just because they're lighter and all that good stuff. So this will be my first winter going in with all mediums. I hope it works, because most of my hives are all mediums. So if it doesn't work, they're all going to be in hard shape. So we'll see what happens. The other thing that I'm doing this year is, I'm a huge proponent of moisture quilts, which is basically a moisture quilt is, basically it's a ventilation rim like this, but it has mesh or some kind of porous material on the bottom, the canvas or mesh or whatever, or screen, very thin screen, and it's filled with wood chips. and you put it right over the hive, not the inner cover, but right over the hive with the exposed top bars, the bees, the whole thing. And any moisture in the hive over the winter just sort of rises into the moisture quilt. It gets absorbed by the absorbent material, wood chips or whatever, and then it evaporates and goes out these holes in the ventilation rim. I've done that in the past. I love it. It absolutely saved my bees when I used to keep them in Logie Bay, which was extremely wet. But I've got a full-time job. I wake up in the morning, I leave the house at 8 o'clock, and I don't get home until 5 or so. And I don't have a lot of time for farting around with moisture quilts in the wintertime. I got 8 hives right now. I've had up to 10. And I don't think I've had 10. I've had 9, maybe a 9. It's just a lot of farting around when you're just one person going at it, right? And you got to either build those moisture quilts or fill them up, and you got to fart around. It's just a little bit too much tinkering around, and I just don't want to do it anymore. So this is what I'm doing. I did this last year a little bit, and it kind of worked. And I'm going to go for it this year because I know a guy in the state that Greg Brown is from, Montana. I think he's from Montana. And what he does is he basically has his hive set up just like this one. You can see right here. Let's see if there's any bees. Okay, good. No bees. Oh, there's the bees down there. Anyway, so he basically has a... God, they almost look dead, right? But they're not. Oh, man, you can really smell them, too. Anyhow, so basically the idea is you just have an inner cover just like this with the hole in the middle. You could have 2 holes in the middle, whatever. You got some kind of holes in the middle, or one over there, whatever. Holes in the inner cover. And you got your ventilation rim, and that's it. No wicking material, no insulation, nothing. Just this is it. Any moisture in the hive escapes through the inner cover hole and just evaporates out the side of the ventilation rim. And that's it. You're done. I've known about that method since I started beekeeping about 10 years ago. But I just wasn't brave enough to give it a shot. But now I am, because I've got my hives right next to my house. So if it doesn't work, or I see it's not working, I can easily come out and switch it to something else and make it work. Put a moisture quilt on or whatever. So that's one thing I'm doing. No moisture quilts, nothing. Just inner cover with a ventilation rim on top. A lot of people in Newfoundland have this kind of a hive, or this is similar to the top of the hive they got. It's a I think it's called a ventilation box or a vent box. It's a part of a DE hive that's been sold by Gerard Smith in Newfoundland, and a lot of people have these. And they're great, absolutely fantastic, really brilliant design. But I haven't noticed any difference between the DE hive and my standard hives that I use that just have the ventilation rim like I just showed you. It's basically ventilation. Ventilation is the key, and it's just a fancy way of doing ventilation, a more expensive way, more pieces. And it works and it's great, but it's a lot more expensive for beekeepers on a budget like me, and I just don't have the time to, convert all my hives to the DE hive. Just put a ventilation rim on top and off you go. And I think it's more or less the same effect, right? So that's what I'm doing, and that's why I'm doing it. I've got 1/4-inch mesh. I put the 1/4-inch mesh on a little bit too early on some of my hives, and it got a little bit clogged up like this guy, but not too bad. I got a little lazy, I gotta say. The other thing I didn't do this year, I did it last year and it worked out really well, is I took... near the end of October, the end of August, I blocked the top entrances on all my hives, and just so that just the bottom entrance was open, and they had ventilation up top. And the bees were still making honey near the end of the fall, or into the fall, but they had to use the bottom entrance. And just by forcing them to use that bottom entrance, I don't know what it is, but they made excellent honey all above the top of the bottom box. So they had big blocks of honey up top. Good insulation, good food, good winter stores, all kinds of fun stuff. But they all went into the winter clustered way down below, and they worked their way up so that later on in the winter, when I unplugged the top entrance and I saw bees coming out of the top entrance, that's when I knew they were running low on honey, because they slowly work their way up, and then they don't come to the top entrance until they've eaten through the honey working their way up, right? So that worked out beautifully for me last year. I was so happy. And I totally forgot to do that this year. Or I didn't forget, I just got lazy. I harvested my honey, or started to harvest my honey, and I said, oh, that's it, I'm done. I've really just, the hell with it. And I didn't do a lot of things I should have been doing to get my bees ready for winter. So I didn't do that, and I wish I'd done that. So that's something, we'll see what happens this year. I don't think it's going to be as much fun because a lot of my bees already are clustering up top, whereas this time last year, almost every one of them were down below. But we've also had a lot of warm weather so far this year, and so it's possible that once it gets really cold, they'll all go right down. And sometimes they do that, but sometimes they don't. But if I block the top entrances in the fall, or just before the fall, and it almost guarantees that they'll cluster down below and work their way up over the winter, which I love. It's just so much easier to read the bees in the winter that way. You know if you need to feed them sugar or not. I just had a cup of coffee about an hour ago, and I don't normally drink coffee. And I'm zapped with the caffeine right now. So I just thought, you know, what the hell, let's do an impromptu bee yard visit. And I think that's about it. I need to put mesh on these babies. Oh, something else, I guess. I could talk about why I have corks poking out of half my hives over here. You can see that one's got a whole bunch of corks. That's a different situation. But basically, I got all these 3/4 inch holes. Oh, look at the... I don't know if you can see this in the dark. No, you can't. Shoot. Anyway, that's all full of propolis. This hive is really propylized, their whole hive. It's great. Anyway, 3/4 inch holes in the middle of a lot of the supers. They could be in the side too. It doesn't really matter. But I drilled, almost all of my supers have these holes drilled in them now. So in the summertime, when the bees are in honey making mode and brood making mode and all kinds of, they're really going at it. Instead of having them go all the way down to the bottom, come in through the bottom or the top, and have to crawl all the way through the hive to get to where they want to go, I just drilled holes in them in the supers, and they go directly to where they need to go. They don't go boop; they just go doop boop boop, and off they go. And I think it helps speeds things up, whatever. But I don't know. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But anyway, I just plug them up with the cork going into the winter, and we're okay. And that's it. The caffeine is starting to wear off. There's other things I had on my mind, but this is basically the big secrets or wisdom I got to impart today. Not much. I think I talked about in another video how you can actually drill a hole in the top super of your hive in the wintertime and just have an inner cover that has no entrance up top. And what it does, I think I did talk about this, and what it does, and you have the hole a couple inches below the inner cover. And this only works if you've got hard insulation up top, and this hole is the only basic exit for the hive, or the ventilation for the hive. And what it does though is if you have the hole a little bit below the top of the hive, the heat rises to the top of the hive, and there's always this 2 or 3 inch layer of heat that just sort of hangs out there. And when the bees can help circulate that air, and just through natural convection, it'll help keep the bees a little bit warmer, just because the entrance is just below the top of the hive, whereas right here, the entrance is right at the very top. And so the heat is just going to go boop and right outside, right? So there's nothing really keeping the heat inside. But anyway, we'll see. So that's the thing, but I haven't really done that. I haven't really experimented much with that. And the other thing was, oh yeah, moisture quilts. Did I talk about moisture quilts with the hole? Yeah, I did. Okay. All right, so that's it. My bee yard looks like a junkyard. I'm not going to put the top on this hive. Yeah, my bee yard looks like a junkyard. I need to landscape this thing and make it look pretty, but it's definitely not there right now. But yeah, this is it. This is all my hives are slightly, the configuration on all my hives is a little bit funky. They're all slightly different, but I think it works as long as they've got some ventilation and they're not absolutely frozen cold. I don't want them warm. I think bee cozies make them too warm, for me anyway, because they're too active and they eat their honey and all that fun stuff. So I don't know, I could be wrong, but anyway, this is how I'm working it. I know I haven't posted anything for a while, and I probably won't because there's not much to post. I've posted things in the past and I'm just repeating myself. So here we go. Beekeeping in Flat Rock.